One of my favorite film directors, Denis Villeneuve, said something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. The real test for a great film is not the critics, it's not film festivals, it's not the accolades, it's not even the box office. The real test for a movie is time. And I think the same applies to video games. After hearing this for the first time, along with posting my video on Jersey Devil, I kept thinking about what it means for a video game to stand the test of time. Not only that, but what about the games released to negative perceptions that still went on to be classics? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how often the public's perception on a game changes for the better. I think for some games we actually don't or maybe even can't see it for what it is until well after its release, and after all the noise surrounding its generation has died down. Because of this, while some games are instant classics, with others, time can be kind. I've been deep in this hobby for the better part of 30 years now, and looking back, I've almost watched some of these more positive shifts happen in real time. I think that for games that experience this, there's a 1-2 punch mentality that's consistent among their early releases. So these are two games that I believe time has been kind to, whether it's a slight tonal shift or a complete 180. The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker has probably experienced the most dramatic shift out of the two. And just because critics were on board at the time doesn't mean anything if you don't have fan support. And boy, were the fans not on board. First shown in Japan at Space World in 2001 and later revealed to a wider audience at E3 the next year, Wind Waker was a big swing in the franchise to do something totally new with its setting and cel-shading art style. The initial reactions to it were so hated, in fact, that I found this old reaction thread on IGN, where they had to create and give Wind Waker its own hate thread. It's an entertaining read with pretty much everyone echoing the same thing. The art style just didn't feel like Zelda. It was too cartoony and just was too big a shift in comparison to the tone and setting of the recent and more serious Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. In a quote from game director Eiji Onuma, the Wind Waker team even had to win over Miyamoto, who reportedly actually cringed when he first saw it. This game does have all the trappings of a Zelda game. A unique premise with a pirate theme and sailing for exploration, but it still has dungeons, still has the classic music, classic items. Nintendo has always managed to pull off keeping just enough of the Zelda formula, but making each entry unique in its own way.
ゼルダは何でも吸収できるし、何をやってもゼルダとも言えるし、うまいことやらないとゼルダと言ってもらえないみたいな変な側面もあるし、なんかね、変な不思議なゲームです。はい。
I want to note here that game development is a creative field, and developers can get burned out working on the same franchise for years or even decades. Satoru Iwata even said in an interview referencing constantly trying to make every Zelda bigger and implement new ideas. I thought it was tradition for working on a Zelda game to turn into a kind of exercise in suffering. Franchises with a lot of entries like this need a big swing like Wind Waker to shake things up from time to time, not only to keep the developers feeling creatively motivated, but to keep the long-running franchises not feeling stale, and to keep offering new experiences to longtime players. Looking back at the 6th generation of consoles, it was an awkward teenage phase for visuals. Developers were getting enough console horsepower to make some huge leaps in lighting and realistic proportions, but things were moving so fast in the console space, it sometimes only took a year for games to feel outdated graphically, and it seems like Nintendo fans, and Miyamoto, wanted Zelda to join suit on the realism train. But I'm glad the Wind Waker team went with their gut. Because things were moving so fast, I don't know if it would have held up in that timeless way that Nintendo is known for, or at least in a way that they were going to be satisfied with. So they went for a more distinctive art style that doesn't really age, instead of chasing realism, or whatever realism was at the time. Now, when you can view it away from those early reactions and message boards, Wind Waker has become a legendary fan favorite, spawning more games in the franchise with that same style. And it's that timeless cel-shading art style that makes the game look like it could have come out yesterday. It's ironic that what was so hated about it in the beginning is a major reason why the game is so sought after and doesn't feel old almost 25 years later. That, coupled with the classic Zelda mechanics and minute-to-minute gameplay, it ends up being just plain fun to get lost in. It's so beloved now that fans actually wore Nintendo down by routinely asking for it to be ported over to the Switch, with jokes about it being one of the only 2 Wii U games not ported over to the Switch along with Twilight Princess. Nintendo finally gave us the GameCube version added to the Nintendo Switch Online, just to give people something because there was no port of the Wii U version in development. In an interview around its release, I think Miyamoto sums up the game best when he said, "But once you play the game, you really come to understand the reason behind the graphics style. And the more you play, the more you kind of forget about the graphics. You'll get sucked into the story, and when making a game, it's really the overall quality of the game that determines whether or not it'll have a high appeal for a wide user base." I think it would be an understatement to say that I'm a huge fan of Halo. I've met Jen Taylor and Steve Downes, hosted LAN parties back in the day, and I think it goes without saying that Bungie did a legendary job of building a believable sci-fi universe with the giant space opera that was Halo 1, 2, and 3. The military campaign of Master Chief and Cortana is perfection, but what I was looking forward to and ready for were new games and new stories that dove deep and expanded more of the universe. When Halo Reach was released in 2010, reactions were mixed. Going into the surprise Covenant attack that led into and explained the intro to Combat Evolved, I could almost feel the community dwindle. At the time, you could not escape it being compared with the emerging juggernaut that was Call of Duty. Modern Warfare 2 had just released a year prior, and the multiplayer community was moving towards faster gameplay with encounters that only lasted seconds, which made Halo multiplayer seem slow in comparison. At launch, the tonal shift of the story was heavily criticized for being too depressing. While yes, full of dread, the campaign is no less inspiring or heroic, just different outcomes. The reaction to armor abilities was also mixed, and a lot of people thought that the ability for a Spartan to sprint was too far a departure from the original trilogy and trying to be too much like Call of Duty. Reach was by no means a failure of a game, but it seemed like all the conversation surrounding it was dominated by comparison. At the time, Bungie had already regained their independence from Microsoft, but was contractually obligated to do one more game. Going into Reach, the developers knew that it was their last entry in the franchise, and were ready to move on to what would become Destiny. They could have pumped out something smaller scale, like another story expansion like ODST, but they didn't. They were still innovating and trying to put together a complete Halo experience, using everything that they had learned up to that point. With an expanded Forge mode, lore expanding campaign, and building onto the multiplayer formula that got them where they were. They were really going out with a bang and trying to make the best and biggest entry in the franchise that they could. And it shows.
In the end, it's all about the game, and the game is king.
Just 4 short years later in 2014, 343 Industries, the new development team in charge of Halo post-Bungie, released the Master Chief Collection. The idea was simple enough: bring every mainline Halo into the modern generation, along with their multiplayer and a remaster of Halo 2. Not so simple. There were so many issues in the collection, specifically with multiplayer, that 343 actually issued an apology and gave early adopters a remaster of ODST as part of that apology. And the response? Why not Reach? Fans saw the potential for and started asking for a remaster of Reach to be added to the collection. It was the first time I remember the community being overwhelmingly positive about the game, without the discussion devolving into a battle of franchises. Stepping away from the gaming climate of 2010 and the behemoth games that were released around it, Halo reaches a monument in gaming history and representative of Bungie at their prime. If you get the chance, check out some of the behind-the-scenes videos put out by Bungie leading up to its release, and you can see just how that passion and innovation behind the game helped reach stand the test of time and propelled it to becoming a fan favorite today. There are a lot of other games that had a bigger swing in public opinion, and I even wrote sections for some, but I chose to focus on these because of how intense their early reactions were and how well regarded they are by most people today. The 1-2 punch that surrounds these, and I think a lot of other games' early releases, is comparison and dismissal. Healthy comparison is just a regular part of evaluating a game, but when those comparisons become broad strokes, they can often turn into a complete dismissal and you can really miss out on a great experience. Both of these represent some of the very best in game development and talent in their day. And with the advantage of time, a lot of that comparative noise fades away, and you can see just how passionate the developers were about furthering their franchise. Whether it's to try a new flavor of exploration, or going out with a bang. I almost envy people discovering or playing these games for the first time today. Picking up a game outside of its generational noise can sometimes be the purest way to experience it. And because of that, time can be all a game needs to be realized for how good it really is. So if there's a game that's receiving a lot of criticism, but you love it, don't worry and try not to listen to the noise. You might just be early to the party.